Level 36. But anyway, we have got a new objective, a new versus that we need to do, and it is arguably harder than the previous because you've got to go on a winning streak. Now, the mistakes you can make is changing your deck every single time. What you're looking for is consistency. Consistency is absolutely key whenever doing this event specifically. I've not really played it too much. I'm going to really start getting into it now. It is the second event that we've had that is a winning streak event. And as you'll probably see, if obviously you go into this, you've got consecutive wins, you need to get up to 5 to be able to do this. Now, obviously, we'll carry on whilst I'm talking. We have got multiple decks that are consistent and more consistent than your standard decks that I try out every single day. I try and do videos on to get away from these boring decks, to be honest, because we know which ones are going to be incredible. When you look across the Limitless site, if you're looking at all the tournaments, they're pretty standard across the board. Everybody knows what they are. They win the tournaments consistently. If we have a look just now, you've got Mewtwo Guard, Gyarados Greninja, Pikachu, Celebi, Executor, Charizard. They are the standard. And to be honest, when it comes to an event like this, the standard is unfortunately going to win out a lot of the time. Like, unfortunately, that is what you've got to do. There's kind of not too many decks that will obviously play to the standard of being able to win 5 times in a row without putting a lot of effort in. Like, there's definitely decks. You could go a fossil deck. You could go at the trapping deck. You could go with Weezing and Muck and go for more of the kind of poison route. And most definitely, you can get the 5 wins. I'm not saying that that's impossible by any shout. But the thing is, it's a lot more difficult than potentially just going with one of these standard decks and getting the wins easier as such. It's not necessarily as much strategic value because we know Mewtwo, Pikachu, if you get it running in form, like for instance now we've obviously got the Pikachu ready. We will then have obviously the second Pikachu, a Zapdos potentially. We're going to throw up a Pokeball to be able to get another Pikachu EX. And then obviously we could go with the Sabrina and just swap him for 1 turn. We'll obviously put the Raichu in. It's very easy when you get to this sort of standard because we know full well they have the weakness, which doesn't happen every time. I could go up against a Mewtwo and it's a battle of who gets there first basically. We know if you get Guard on Mewtwo, you're pretty much done unless you're already in a position where you can start taking out Mewtwo in pretty much 1 turn. And then the same with Pikachu. If they're setting up and I get my Pikachu, if they could just delay me for a second, for instance, if this guy was going to use a Sabrina, then obviously that's going to delay me for an extra turn. It might give him enough to be able to power up the Articuno. It might be able to bring something else in. That's obviously the thing that you've got to then go for a deck sort of play where you're kind of using your items, your support cards. And one thing that I did notice, I've very rarely ever played the proper game, the actual TCG. I think it's Pokemon TCG Live. And I must admit, the amount of cards that you've got there to choose from is outrageous. Like trying to get a deck, it is no just single deck whatever. So let's get a Pokeball in here. And that most definitely is where we're going to go eventually with adding the next expansion. And it makes it a little bit more tricky with these events because there is more kind of weaknesses and strengths to go about. Like we'll find that potentially Pikachu isn't as good as X, Y, and Z deck. I've realised I've let him take that. Have I let them take this? Is it 60? Oh, it is 80. Oh, okay. We'll see how we go anyway, but just because I'm not paying attention at all. But that is the kind of point. You've got to be more methodical with your choices. You've got to make sure that the deck is set up right. Obviously, like here, he's kind of going for that Pikachu. What I can do then is bring in one of the Pikachus, swap him in. He's going to change it for some reason. Don't quite know why. I'm assuming he's just going to let me have that one. But at that point, it's letting me build up somebody else as well. I can obviously go with my Zapdos. I don't know why. Unless he already put the energy down. He might have done. I don't quite know why we've done that. But for instance, with this, obviously now we can obviously go with the Sabrina. We can whack out one of his. He's going to let me have one or the other, so it's absolutely fine. We could then start maybe going up. He's conceded on that one. To be honest, I got very lucky there because I'm not paying attention whatsoever. But that's the Pikachu deck. It's the same with a Mewtwo. The only thing with a Mewtwo I find, and it can work with a Pika, is if you've necessarily got the RNG and you don't get all of your basic Pokemons out. Mewtwo, you don't get guards set up. It can be a little bit more tricky. It can be. And the one thing that I do like with the Pika deck is I very rarely find fighting decks or any decks that go for the weakness. It just isn't the thing. Whereas I am finding more and more increasingly Weezing Grimer decks that can really put a punch in against the Mewtwo. Now, if you get it set up, I don't think it matters massively. Mewtwo has won in every scenario that I've tried him in, so it is kind of one of them. But the big thing with this is a trial and error. It's not necessarily a per time sort of event. It's not like you've got 50 goes and if you don't get the 5 in a row, that's it. You could just keep going until the event's done. And sometimes you'll get to the 4. It can be the most frustrating thing in the world. I think last event, it happened to me 3 times that I got to 4 and 3 or even just a 2 can be quite annoying. And you just don't get the deck. Like how this has started out. We've got the Professor's Research. We've got 1. He's also going with a Pikachu deck as well. Clearly he's done pretty well to get the 1 in. I'm going first as well, so I need a basic or a Sabrina, that kind of works, but we're going to go with the obvious Professor's Research first, but it already puts me at the disadvantage straight away. I can obviously go with a Raichu. It is going to be a decent one to go against because we might be able to get something in, or we kind of play with a Zapdos. So for instance, for this, we're going to leave it there, because now we got to think, because we're going against Pikachu as well, I haven't got my EX, I haven't got the bench going on, what's kind of my next move here? Obviously, we could potentially let him have one and kind of start powering up Zapdos instead, throw the Raichu on top instead as well. We could also then potentially go and Sabrina him and go against the kind of Dedenne or the Blitzel instead. So we've got another Pikachu here. So we've got that. What do I want to do? I've got the 1 and I could only do 20 damage at the moment. Or do I power up this and go for the 4 coins and potentially take him out in 1 at least? I'm going to go with that option. So we're going to get the Raichu in. We're going to then go ahead with here. And then I'm going to go... I'm going to let him have 1 attack just in case he does want a Sabrina. Hopefully... Oh, okay, that'll do. We get the Raichu next to hold off that. That's not too bad. We'll keep it like that. And it could be a loss here. And I've got to start again. And the big thing with it is choosing the deck that you know very well. That's going to be the big one, is when I was using the Eevee deck. The first 2-3 times, you kind of don't know which one to go for because you're kind of there and thinking, well, if I go into Flareon now, it might not work out. And it's most definitely utilizing what you kind of, what you're given and what potentially is coming in the deck. So for instance now, I know I've got both Pikachus, I've had both Raichus, I've still got a Zapdos and Pikachu in my deck. I've then obviously got both my Sabrinas, both my Professor's Research, so I know I've got a Pokeball coming. I've already got a potion on the deck as well. What I could do here is obviously go ahead, whack this in here. We could then potentially... I'm going to see if he's going to actually attack it. So we'll kind of leave our Raichu as almost a sacrifice. If obviously he doesn't take it and he wants to Sabrina, we could obviously put in the other Raichu. We could heal up, swap into obviously the Zapdos at some point if he does take him out in 1. And then we can try and do the Zapdos. We get 2 turns with it if he's obviously gonna go for it, which he has done. And even he hasn't got the full bench yet. So that's a big factor on this. So if I get 3 heads, the Pikachu's gone and it puts me in a very vital position. I've obviously got the other Pikachu, but now I've obviously given him a lead. We obviously then have got the fact that I don't necessarily have any backup. If Zapdos goes, that's kind of the big one right there. So obviously here we're going to go here, and with the Giovanni, I'm gonna... Do I do it? Yeah, well, we'll do the Giovanni just because the Pikachu's the one we want to get rid of. He's the EX. If we manage to get at least 2, which would be fantastic. Not 1. Ooh, and that's it. We get the 60 at least. So at the next turn, we need to get at least 2. So that's going to be the biggest thing. Again, Giovanni on the next one. We have 2 of them in the deck. So if we pull the next one, we only need 1 coin. That's going to be pretty vital. He might go ahead and swap him out and bring in another Pikachu EX. That's going to be the big thing. But we know full well he can't take him out in 1 at this point. Unless there's something I don't know about. He can't take this Zapdos out straight away, which is what we kind of played him for. We now have the chance to go ahead and put in the Pikachu as well. So obviously with this, we now need to think, what shall we do? Because he's going to go with that Pikachu. He has got Blitzel, so we're not in the greatest positions here, to be fair. We have got the potion, So what we're going to have to do is... because we've got the Pikachu, but that's going to take another turn. We could bring Zapdos out, but obviously he's not going to be able to take a hit off... what's this? This attack does 40 damage to one of your opponents. Zebra Striker, attack 30 damage. So we're going to have to bring him out regardless. So what we'll do, we'll bring him out and retreat him to the bench. We're going to have to bring a Pikachu EX in, obviously. We will then swap that, and then we do have a Sabrina, just to hold him out for a second. It might not be the greatest move, but we can do it for now. He's obviously going to... is that on the bench, or is that... so one of your opponent... oh, ooh... can that do it off the bench? If it does, I've not really come up against an Electabuzz, and that's something that you kind of learn. It's not always the prettiest way, and if you do lose, I'd rather lose after one than going in and doing a few more. But Pikachu's deck is pretty consistent. The main ones you are going to struggle in is, can he hit the... he can hit the bench. So that's it. You've got to play to your strengths. I'm not the greatest. I've never said I'm absolute top material, and Pikachu can lose. That's the thing. Maybe sacrificing the Raichu maybe wasn't the best move at the start. Maybe sacrificing an EX to start with and maybe trying to get up to that point might have been the better move there. So coming up against Pikachu decks themselves is going to be difficult. You can do the exact same with Mewtwo. We could have every single strength going. If you come up against a Mewtwo deck, that's where you're going to struggle the most as well, because you're both playing, and it's basically who gets there first. If none of you get there, fantastic. Then it goes down to pretty much who gets the attacks first, who starts second. These are all the things that really help. So for instance, if I look at my Celebi deck, or if I go for... I'm pretty sure I've got this Celebi Executor deck. It's another one, and you want the quick damage straight away. If you're going to be consistent, it's about getting the damage in as quick as possible, because if you're putting them on the back foot, that's where mistakes get made. We saw the exact same on the first one. Because I put him in a slot where he knows Pikachu can do the damage, they might have second guessed what they're doing. That can have the play, and yes, against some top level players, I don't know if you can ever figure out if you're against them. That's going to be the biggest kind of plot that you kind of go against. We've obviously Celebi. We've obviously got the two moves that he can do. It's very well, 2 energies for the move. And again, something like this, it's going to be very difficult. He can obviously go straight away with the attack. Flip a coin of head, the attack does 30 more damage. Obviously, we've got Executor here as well. We could then go ahead and use Leaf if we really wanted to as well at the same time. So we're going to let him go with 1. Executor is going to be a big one that you kind of have to try with the 1 energy, but then we can start powering up Celebi at the same time, which is going to be fantastic. But then also I've got to remember, he's now potentially got a full fire deck, which I can imagine is likely. We've got to try and beat all of that with the odds of basically attacking first, getting all the moves on. He's obviously got the Moltres as well, which I don't even know what he'd actually have. Is it a heads toss for this? So hopefully get tails, because he's already going to be doing 30 damage in general. Does get the tails because obviously the weakness, which is fine. We just now need to get Executor in as quick as possible, or we can obviously have the Mew. Obviously we did get the Executor, which is fantastic. We can obviously go ahead and put that on him. We could then go ahead, swap Leaf in, and then we can go ahead and start attacking with Executor as well, which is always perfect in the retreat value, but it still doesn't mean we're actually going to get it. Obviously, with the attack in general, we will show you, if you've not seen Executor at all, it does the 40, and then it does 40 more damage if we manage to get the heads. Unfortunately, we didn't. He's going to get 20, might bring in Rapidash then, and then potentially could have a really big attack, which is then now the best thing is we can start powering up Celebi. We could even negate Celebi a little bit and then go for the Mew instead. The only problem there is the fact that we only have 1 Mew in the deck. So if he does use a Sabrina, there's Celebi open for a weakness. If obviously he went for the Moltres, he'd obviously do 90. If he then had a Giovanni, he's then going to go ahead and do a little bit more. We've got the 40 here. If it does heads, it does 60 more damage, so we can do 120. And then obviously if he's going to go for the next Ponyta as well, it's going to be a lot of damage to try and kind of go away from. So we kind of pray for the tails again. We have got the Erica, which is a fantastic one. And this is the point of knowing your decks. Learning them. If you want to trial them out on just random battles first, it's always going to be fantastic to be able to get that extra little bonus in. We've obviously got this, so we do need to get the heads in this straight away. Otherwise, we're in a little bit of a kind of a non-comfortable zone, to be honest. We can start going with Celebi now as well, which is always good. And it's why Executor is a fantastic one. But it is all reliant on the heads. So if we didn't manage to get that, then obviously Executor's gone. It's all down to Celebi to be able to do the moves. Now we could take at least one hit off somebody. They haven't got any energies anywhere else. The main thing is, they're not EXs either, so he could put a Ponyta in and start powering up the Moltres, or he's going to go completely the opposite. But regardless, it's still one that they could go with. For instance here, we can obviously keep powering Celebi up. We can try and do the attack. It's going to take us at least 2 heads to be able to do anything with this. But it does mean that we still have the Celebi going for the heads again. And that's going to be the point that you're just trying to kind of keep going by. And against a weakness, it's very difficult. If you get to that 5th battle, you need to know kind of how you're going to go around actually beating your weakness if you've got one. So he's got 2 already. So we're going to have to try and do something here. We'll go with a Pokeball. We're going to hopefully get another Celebi. Okay, we get another Execute, but is what it is. We'll also then go ahead and whack another Ericaron, which means it gives us an extra bit of wiggle room, which is always nice. We can start going with a Celebi. If we can get another heads, that would be fantastic, but we know the laws of the tails is unfortunately not going to give us. So now we've got still 2 more attacks until we get there. And obviously this is still giving me Celebi attacks. He can obviously do the 100 at the moment. Every single heads we get for the Celebi, energies we get for the Celebi, will add an extra flip, which is always what we want. We kind of don't want to go against a Charizard. He knows he's safe with another Moltres. He has obviously got the heals as well. So we're still within 2 heads. Whether we get the 2 heads in a row, whether we want to kind of chance that against him, but we could potentially allow him to just take the Execute, because we know if Celebi keeps going, we will get to a point where the heads, well, the coin flips that we're going to have is too much to go against anyway. So that is always a big one. He got 3 tails in a row. That is a big yike. So it kind of didn't benefit him at all. Obviously with this, we can go with the Giovanni. We'll leave the Giovanni at the moment. That's going to be pretty good for the Celebi. We might use the Giovanni next turn. We get another tail. So we're still doing chip damage at the minute. That's going to give us within room. So if he doesn't get another potion, it gives us within room if we get a heads next that we can obviously go ahead and take it out in 1. He's going to realise that. So if there's another potion in his hand, he will utilise that, because then we've still got 2 more turns. If we got a heads at least in that, we could be just a heads away, or at least he would be then thinking, well, even if he does get the heads, he still couldn't take me out. So he might even swap at this point potentially, which he's not going to. I mean, he's playing with the heads. If we get the heads next turn, he is finished. So he's kind of preying on our downfall here of going with the tails. And to be honest, it's probably the only way at this point, because obviously if we don't get the heads, he then has the kind of breathing room to maybe put the Charizard in. But he's got to risk it as well, which is the big thing. So we're going to go... The Giovanni kind of doesn't make any sense at this point, because if we don't... No, because if we don't get the heads, he's only going to swap out next turn anyway. An extra 10 isn't going to do it. But there we go. We've managed to get the heads. Executor, absolutely brilliant. And that's another deck that you can obviously utilise. When it comes to the Mewtwo deck, which is kind of the next one, you've still got Gyarados and Greninja. They're always nice with their abilities, but we can't showcase every single one, because then you've still got the Charizard Moltres. I don't think the Ponyta double is going to help there, personally. I would much rather go with the Arcanine if you're kind of looking at a fire deck. But again, each to their own. And then kind of looking at the Weezing's, Scolipede is always a good deck, if you can use it right, especially with the Koga, bringing the Weezing back out, bringing the Muk back out. It's always great to kind of take a little bit of damage, bring it back to your deck, put it back on. We see it with the Buddying Expedition with Mew as well. It's always nice. So trying to get the 5 wins in a row, it is quite simply just keep going, but make sure you're setting your deck up. You don't want to be at a point where the deck's just not consistent enough for you to ever get there. It's going to take almost a 5% chance to get the 5 wins in a row. There's plenty of decks that we've utilised. If you want to check any out on obviously the channel, we've got quite a few, and normally the kind of better ones that are kind of up there with your Mewtwo's, even your Dragonites, to be honest. Druddigon's always a nice kind of balanced one as well. We obviously use the Flareon. The Flareon Vaporeon. I don't think that one's as consistent, personally. I think you're better off going for the Greninja, Gyarados, your Mewtwo's, your Celebes, and your Pikachus. Them, for me, are the most consistent with the most basic play that you can do. It's very hard to combat them unless you're playing the same deck and it just works out for you. So let me know what decks you're running. Have you done the 5 already? It's been out for a couple of days, so I'd imagine there is quite a few people that have got there. Let me know, and I'll catch you for the next one. Peace.